Oh, what a shame. On a weekend when teams in and around us were dropping points, we had a chance to make it 4 out of the last 5 at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. In fact, incredible historical stat. Had Villa won on Sunday, it would have been the first time almost to the day in 100 years that Villa took 3 consecutive games away at Spurs. Instead, we took a thumping. Was it really a thumping? I don't think so. That scoreline might have flattered the hosts. Don't ask a Spurs fan about that. But regardless, second loss of the season and first away from home, presented by 24/7 Services. Let's dissect Spurs 4, Villa 1. It was the end of a very tough week for Villa, a rather demoralizing winless one, especially with all the rotation in the Carabao Cup, which was designed to give those players some minutes, but also have fresh legs for the weekend. And I thought for sure that Tottenham might be spent after putting a lot of effort into the win over Manchester City in the EFL Cup, and it was kind of the opposite that happened. They looked fresher, especially after halftime, and I didn't see that one coming. That might have been one of the worst weeks in Unai Emery's Aston Villa tenure, second maybe to only whatever week those Olympiacos games fell in. The other sad thing about Sunday, it was Unai Emery's 53rd birthday, and he wanted to dedicate that game to the city of Valencia, where he spent 6 of his managerial years, including the local club and then the neighboring rival club Villarreal, where Pau Torres is from. And Unai Emery still owns a restaurant in the city, La Casita de Sabino, which I guess was spared of the horrendous devastation caused by quite extraordinary flooding, because the restaurant was open all weekend. But if you're a Villa fan like me, I'm sure you looked at all of this and by halftime you thought this is all lining up nicely until Tottenham played the role of party poopers. Welcome to the Holy Trinity Show, Trinity meaning 3, as I try to decipher the 3 key issues or moments that define Spurs 4, Villa 1. Making the journey to the capital were our budding correspondents Owen Power and Pat Fowkes. They've been happy travelers up until Sunday. Villa's record at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium has been a bit of an anomaly. I think the numerical story can be summed up with one stat, and that's big chances created versus big chances missed. At the very bottom there, Spurs created 3 big chances and converted all of them. Villa created 4, apparently, and missed on 3, and one of those big chances might have really changed the complexion of the game because of the timing of it. And we wasted what I thought was an excellent first half defensively, because we did out-duel our opponents. You see tackles won 11 in total, but 6 of those came in the first half. And odd as well that in the high-line derby, there were no offsides between the teams. I'm starting to think Dominic Solanke has our number no matter what uniform he's wearing. It's quite extraordinary to me how often we come up against a player that is in some kind of a scoring slump, usually a striker, and they bury 1, or in this case 2, against us. Big question, who was more ticked off about being substituted? Sonny or our Big Morgs? The fact that he was ticked off is probably a good sign because he was hobbled as he came off. And then there's Matt Cash, who unfortunately looks like he's going to spend a little bit of time in the treatment room again. Let's get straight to big issue number 3. Who are ya? Did you realize that at halftime on Sunday, we officially reached the quarter pole of this current Premier League season? Shame that it couldn't have just ended there with a 1-goal lead, clean sheet, and 3 points. Instead, we started the second quarter of the season by shipping 4 goals, being -4, and of course losing away from home. But this is a good milestone to take some stock and inventory on what we've done so far. And if anybody had come to you in early August and said, At the quarter pole, you'll be tied for fourth in the Premier League, top six, and you'll be leading the Champions League. You would have chewed their hand off to take that. So from the 30,000-foot view, things look pretty good. Especially when you compare it with, say, Crystal Palace, who had a fantastic run-in at the end of last season. They've beaten us now consecutively in separate competitions. But on Saturday, they could only manage a 2-2 draw with Wolves and a single point, which means that I won my bet with my Palace pal Paul, because the Eagles have only landed 7 points through the first quarter of the season. Do the math on that. That's a 28-point season projected. Those are relegation numbers. If we were to compare the start of last season with this, well, last year we rattled off 7 wins and a draw for 22 points, which is 4 more points than we have now. But we have currently the exact same records as Arsenal and Chelsea, and we're tied with those two teams for fourth place. The difference is we have a much smaller budget than those teams and probably less expectation, which Unai Emery is only too happy to bring up in his pre-match media availability. Love the managerial mind game, saying that, well, no, United, Spurs, Chelsea, and Newcastle should be doing better than us. Last year, though, we scored 26 goals in those first 10 games, which is 9 more than this year, and we've actually conceded 2 more goals this season. I guess a good follow-up question would be, well, which was the most difficult schedule between this year and last? Last year, we played 3 legitimate relegation candidates, but this season, I would argue we've actually played 4, because Wolves, Everton, Ipswich, and to a lesser extent, maybe Leicester. My concern at the moment, though, is that we're neither nor. We are not capitalizing on the great situations we're creating, ergo not scoring enough goals, and we've only had 1 clean sheet, which is 1 fewer than this same stretch last season, but it just seems like we're more defensively vulnerable in the Premier League somehow. Whereas last year, it was almost as if we could just score our way out of defensive problems. We're still playing the same way. Unai Emery wants a control system where you play 2 or 3 balls to bypass a press, accelerate through midfield, and hopefully make something happen. And if you're good in transition, all the better. But there have been some personality changes too, and ingredient changes. And I didn't want to say this at any point this season, but we do miss Moussa Diaby and Douglas Luiz at times. I mean, Diaby's pace was a problem for teams, and he had beautiful feet as well. Even if he's not directly involved, he could still drag people around and cause concerns, whereas Douglas Luiz, a consummate playmaker who chipped in with goals. The direct replacements, well, it's Morgan Rogers for Diaby because he plays in the 10. And okay, Morgan Rogers is younger, less experienced, but he's well on his way to filling the goals void that Diaby provided last year with 3 already. And he has a way higher ceiling because he's younger and a high potential player. Not to mention he has a physical presence that Moussa didn't have, and that's one of the reasons why I think he drifted in and out of games at times. Douglas Luiz, Yuri Tielemans is his replacement, and although Yuri hasn't scored yet this season in the Premier League, he has been essential in our build-up play, and he has had goal involvements. And so I look at those as kind of a wash, but Diaby is a special ingredient. And then Amadou Onana right now is kind of playing the role Boubacar Kamara played for us last year before he got injured. One of the questions I have now about our defending, is it our personnel? Is it the unit, the back 4 as a group? Or could it also be the players in front of that back 4 turning the ball over? Because neither Pau Torres nor Diego Carlos are particularly fond of defending wide open spaces. And 3 of the 4 goals we conceded on Sunday came as a result of a sloppy turnover, a bad pass, another couple of bad passes, and then eventually a foul that we could have avoided taking. Ollie Watkins was largely responsible for the 2-1 goal because he tries to do something very difficult, turn the ball around the corner without even seeing what's behind him, in this case, Ben Davies. And I do wonder, is it up to Ollie Watkins to decide solely when to try and turn and drive with it, or when to just play with your back to goal, and keep us in possession. But the 3-1 goal, which effectively killed the game, came from a very uncharacteristic errant pass from Pau Torres. And it's a cardinal rule in football. If you're going to play a square infield ball, it needs to be precise, and your teammate better be ready for it. And neither was true in this particular case. It is incredible how many times these situations are punished with goals, and for a hard-pressing team, which Spurs kind of are, that's their bread and butter. Big moment number 2, Watkins wide. You're leading 1-0 away from home against a rival in the table. It's been an excellent first half, and in minute 42, you conjure up what would easily be considered as a big chance. And this came after a spell when the ball was going back and forth between teams as they were trying to get a foothold of the game. And Villa did an excellent job of stepping in, snuffing it out, and then at times turning it back the other way. And Morgan Rogers has had this habit of spinning a few of these in the direction of Ollie Watkins, including for the game winner at home to Wolves and for the one that led to the red card at Fulham. You could see right away that Watkins had rounded the corner and that he had beat Romero for pace. And how many times over the years have we seen Ollie Watkins play that back across goal and nestle it neatly into the far corner? Unfortunately, this time with his left foot, he pulled it well wide. Now, let's play the what-ifs here. Villa take a 2-0 lead. That's a completely different mindset, especially if you're the team 2-0 down that now has to stew on it at halftime for 15 minutes. And I'm not saying that Spurs might not have still come back and scored 3 or 4 in the second half, but you know the drill. Villa would have come out hyper-conscientious, maybe even setting up in a low block like they kind of did for much of that first half to great effect to ensure that that first goal wasn't scored. Before we continue, there have been some suggestions by certain unhinged members of the Villa fan base, but also the clickbaity media, that perhaps Villa's first quarter results have papered over some cracks. Now, Painter J from 24/7 Services, who will also hang paper upon a request, would take those comments with great offense because, first of all, he's a massive Aston Villa fan, as is most of the 24/7 Services crew, but also the suggestion that somebody would paper over cracks without correctly and perfectly filling them first before any decorating continues, well, that might actually keep him up at night. One way you can really benefit from 24/7 Services is if you own an apartment complex or some rental properties, because there's a very tight window between a tenant moving out and a new one moving in to go and do some regular upkeep, whether that's a fresh coat of paint, buffing up the floors, fixing little things here and there in the kitchen or some appliances. Because if you do that, you are actually increasing the property value, and that means you can get a higher leasing or rental rate. Even if you're trying to convert a property to, say, a Verbo or Airbnb type secondary income, well, you have them come in there and you do a little spruce up, you can command a higher rate per night. Talk to Paul and the team. The website has the phone numbers on it, but I always put the phone numbers in the description of these videos. Big issue. In fact, this could probably be a top 3, but big Ange's halftime team talk. Now, at the risk of annoying some Spurs fans here, and heaven knows I've had to hear from a lot of them over the last day or so, the alternative of winning comfortably on Sunday, i.e. losing to Aston Villa, could have caused a lot of problems for the Tottenham manager. It was nice for them to defeat Manchester City in midweek in the EFL Cup after a very lackluster loss to Crystal Palace last weekend. But this is one of the have clubs in the Premier League, and I would suggest the expectations are much higher than those of even Aston Villa. Do you know Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is second only to Old Trafford in terms of capacity, but with its ultra-modern amenities, it can service all sorts of different kinds of supporters. And that means that they can garner more revenue and they'll have higher turnover, therefore a higher transfer budget. And in my opinion, they have not capitalized on that luxury since Big Ange arrived. And had they lost on Sunday, they would have been 8 points back of Aston Villa. And I'm not saying the panic button would have been pushed, but at least it would have been out on the table, no question. So I'm sure there was extreme emphasis put on that halftime team talk, because already you can see it in some Spurs circles. There are questions being asked as to whether Big Ange is the right fit for this club. Here's my feeling, and this is not me being bitter after a 4-1 loss, but I think their style is too taxing for the squad that they have. I said a similar thing about Oliver Glasner and Crystal Palace in midweek. It seems like there are players always injured at Tottenham. I mean, Sonny was just returning. Van de Ven was out. You had Richarlison and Romero hobbling off. Now you got to mix in a Europa League campaign on top of a Carabao Cup quarterfinal at the beginning of December. It's kind of like Marcelo Bielsa, who everybody loves because he's the nutty professor with this really aggressive, hard-pressing, intense style. How much did he win over his career? His teams always seem to fizzle out. And this is the question I have for Spurs. Can they continue to play this way throughout the season? And I was shocked when the commentator said only one team has lost more than Spurs this calendar year, and that's Wolves. Tottenham has lost 9 of their last 16 Premier League games heading into this one. And the number one big moment that defined Spurs 4, Villa 1, the 1-1 goal. Obviously, Big Ange's halftime team talk and instructions elicited the desired effect. For Aston Villa, the messaging would have sounded like, do exactly what you did in those first 45 minutes, because they were impeccable. Villa kept its shape. They were patient. They were stout. They picked their moments to go forward. And when they couldn't, they pulled off a very nice set-piece routine. And I reiterate, the strangest thing about this game for me was the fact that this was the same Villa 11 that faced Bournemouth last week, so they had a whole week in between because of the 10 changes against Crystal Palace. You would have thought for sure that it would have been Villa who had the fresher legs and fresher minds as the game wore on. Instead, the complete opposite happened. And you can't blame the Villa players for coming out of the halftime tunnel feeling pretty good about themselves, thinking we're just going to carry on doing exactly what we did in that first half. And this now becomes a resilience and a mental issue when you get hit that early at the start of a half. I mean, it wasn't just that Tottenham had leveled the game, it was that they did it 3.5 minutes in to the second half. And you know, they have this habit of conceding first and then reversing the scoreline. I think that was the 8th time they had done it in actually a very short period of games at home. And the Villa players were probably told that, and they should have done more to try and prevent it. Now, Spurs' first goal came shortly after Morgan Rogers was chopped down by the Butcher Bentancur, which is actually a great nickname because, you know, Uruguayans take their meat very, very seriously. But on another day in the very inconsistent world of Premier League refereeing, that could have been a second yellow card, like, I don't know, maybe last week in the game between Bournemouth and Aston Villa where 13 yellow cards were brandished. At least Craig Pawson was consistent as he kept the notebook away for both teams. But the problem is when you forgive the one at the end of the first half, you give the Butcher license to go and hack somebody else down later in the game. I mean, you could read Morgan Rogers' lips. How is that not a foul? Anyway, play carried on, and from there, the next time Villa touched the ball was from a kickoff at midfield. Initially, it looked to me that between McGinn and Cash, we had Sonny under control, but credit the Korean. He fizzes in a perfect ball that Emi Martinez was not willing to go out and try to get. And then on the backside of that, Pau Torres was somehow marking 2 attacking players. I'm not sure if Luka Dean was meant to be goal side of either Johnson, the eventual goal scorer, or Solanke. But this was 3.5 minutes in, and all of a sudden we're done from a mental switch off, And that was the moment when the momentum ball started to roll. The crowd suddenly got into it. John McGinn said that's the loudest he'd ever heard it in that stadium. And now Villa were in this weird mental spot where suddenly the game plan was ripped up and they had to decide, well, what do we do? Are we going to try to chase a goal again and muster up the energy to do that? We're not going to sit in a low block and accept a 1-1 draw early in the second half. And in the end, they really did neither. They didn't chase the game and they didn't get back to that disciplined low block that they had in the first half. And you know how it is if you've been involved in football or sport for that matter. The moment when you know momentum is going to change, and it did on that goal, you could feel it. I knew it. And that's why preventing that first goal for as long as possible, and ideally until after you had scored a second, which is something Villa has done so many times under Unai Emery. Get that second goal because the opponent is now chasing the game. The Sill Hill Brewery star performer was Amadou Onana. He has been a bit of a one-half wonder to start this season, with Ross Barkley coming in relief after 45 minutes, I think because of a pain management issue, but no Ross now. So Onana went the full 90 minutes, and you didn't notice him quite as much as the second half wore on. But still, that first half, he was fantastic. 7 clearances, 7 recoveries. He completed all of his passes in the game, except for one, 97%. He won 2 of 3 tackles, hit the post on a cross. I'm pouring Amadou a wow zesty IPA because he had a zesty first half. And you know, he was beautifully balanced in this game between attack and defense. Hopefully one day, Amadou Onana will be considered a club legend like Williams, Morley, and Bremner. Tickets are still selling for an evening with champions at the end of this month, and I've put a link to the tickets for that event in the description of this video. Let's update the categories I like to tally throughout the season. Our road record is now blemished. We did score from a set piece, but so did the annoying James Maddison. And we scored first, but that doesn't matter much when you can't keep a clean sheet. Spurs scored 2 goals in that final 15-minute phase and 1 in the 60 to 75-minute phase. Anytime you concede 4, you're probably going to be hit for stats. But oddly, fouls were dead even, 14 each. And in the High Line Derby, as I mentioned earlier, not one offside between the two teams. Now, the good news is that we have a Champions League game to look forward to on Wednesday in what I'm told is a simply beautiful city in a country that has given us Yuri Tielemans and Amadou Onana. And I'm sure that those two are going to be very motivated to perform at their highest. I've heard that the chocolate is slightly overrated, but the beer is not. Now, if you look at the respective market values of the squads, you'll see there's a bit of a discrepancy, and that's potentially a bit of a trap. However, Genk is the only team ahead of Club Brugge right now. They've had a great start to their league campaign, and they're coming off an away win on Saturday. Club Brugge's Champions League campaign, however, has been a bit mixed. They lost at home to Dortmund, then won away at Sturm Graz before losing away at Milan. And they must be thinking, if we're going to get into these knockout phases, then this home game against Aston Villa is of huge importance. So I imagine they're actually going to pour a lot into this game. For Villa, it's a chance to bounce back. It is a chance to rotate the squad, but that's always the big question for me, considering there's this game at Anfield on the horizon. And speaking of Anfield, there's a connection. The one player you will certainly recognize from this group is former Liverpool goalkeeper and Belgian national team keeper, Simon Mignolet. I'm pretty sure there won't be a change in goal. I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of Emi Martinez's contract. I'm playing in all Champions League games. And you'd wonder if they'd break up the Pau Torres-Diego Carlos Champions League center back pairing, even though it didn't look the best by the end on Sunday. But I could also see a world where this might be the perfect start for Tyrone Mings and maybe even Boubacar Kamara as well, because it's been a full week since they went 90 at Crystal Palace. And we'll have to await the status on Matty Cash and Morgan Rogers, although judging by how ticked off Rogers looked after being dragged, he should be good to go. But there is something telling me that potentially Unai Emery is going to prioritize the Liverpool game on the weekend and not roll out what would be considered maybe our strongest group on Wednesday. This beautifully demonstrates how I felt about Sunday. Not that I would condone certain gestures made by children, but I still think that kid is a legend. Now, I was rather fuzzy on Sunday morning to begin with, so not the best start, because I probably overdid it on Saturday night for a fresh Dungeness crab feast with beer at my buddy Steve's house. They caught it that morning. I mean, this is one of the benefits of living in beautiful British Columbia. Fresh caught Dungeness crab. So much of it, we had to almost throw some of it away on November the 2nd. And you know what my honey bunny Sandra made for breakfast on Sunday? Belgian waffles, for what it's worth. Until the Champions League game, remain rational. And as always, up the mighty Villa.